Hey guys, Meteorologist Chris Tomer here with this Tuesday mountain weather update to radar first. Let's take a look around the west here. And boy, that area of high pressure is really starting to flex its muscle. It's pushing everything up to the north, bottling up the cold air, and your moisture, your storm track is running up through BC and then kind of brushing northern Idaho and northwest Montana. And there's a lot of rain here on the board. Very warm conditions over the next 2 or 3 days across a lot of the west. And then through parts of California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. It's going to be even warmer than that beneath this area of high pressure. I'll show you some of the freezing levels. They're really going to shoot up to high elevation in the next few days. Up in the Northeast, the storm track with these clippers continues to lay down some light accumulations across upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. That will continue. Let me take a look at water vapor here. So this is low level, and oranges and reds are going to be your drier air. Moisture's in the whites and the blues, and you can really see this ridge of high pressure developing over California. All that dry air, everything's being forced up and around it, up into the Pacific Northwest, Canada, and then down and around. But that is a dominant factor for now. Let me draw the storm track. So everything's kind of being run up into here, up and around the high and then down with all these clippers into the Great Lakes. So that's what's happening for now. Down the road, there are some pretty significant changes. I've been showing you this integrated vapor transport forecast for the last few days, and we're still looking, it still looks like a weak to moderate atmospheric river is possible between the final day of March and probably just the first week in general of April. You can see this, and this is effective for that San Francisco Bay corridor running up to towards the Tahoe area. You can see the spike in integrated vapor transport. That would be a reflection of just new moisture, additional moisture moving in, the storm track shifting into California, and that would have a distinct impact on a lot of the West. So there is the possibility here. There is a light at the end of the tunnel that this could happen. All right, here are my bullet points this morning. So let's talk about the freezing levels, the rain, snow line, the freezing level, however you want to look at it. Interior BC up to 6,500 feet or higher. So that means you got to be above that mark to really get the best snowfall. The Pacific Northwest, it could be 8,000 feet, maybe even higher in some places over the next 2.5, 3 days. Northwest Montana up to 9,000 feet. I mean, that just precludes so many areas from seeing snow. Utah up to 12,500 feet. Remember, you're beneath this area of high pressure. Same for Colorado. I mean, we could have freezing levels close to the top of our highest peaks in the state, 13,500 to 14,000 feet. And still looking at that possibility of an atmospheric river set up into that first week of April. I showed you that. All right, here's my snow timeline. Best odds of snow for Big Sky, the Wasatch, the Tetons, Colorado, interior BC, the Pacific Northwest, Tahoe, and the Northeast. So, for example, in the Wasatch, you're going to have to wait. 28 into 29 could be heavy. Heavy accumulation, moderate 331, and then heavy again. That first week of April looks pretty interesting. Heavy around 4.2, and maybe even beyond that. Colorado, late 328, 329, light, moderate 330, and then potentially heavy 331, 4.1, and maybe even beyond that. A lot of other places are truly going to be fighting these high freezing levels. In Tahoe, the pattern 327, there's a shot of moisture, moderate to heavy, 28, 331, and then it could be heavy once the storm track shifts back with that AR potential setup, 4.1, 4.2. In the Northeast, you've got a pretty decent shot of moisture coming in, 329, 330, 331, but it looks like it's going to be a mix of rain and snow across a lot of the Northeast. All right, let's do an update on where we stand for the season so far. And I only chose, there was only room for 6 resorts here. Let me take my video off this so you can see it. But Alyeska, Alaska is still up there at 594. But if you excluded anything outside the lower 48, Mount Baker is at the top. At least the ski resorts that I checked, 541. Alta's there, 482. Jackson Hole, 432. Mount Rose, Nevada, looking at 325. Aspen Highlands at 310 so far. Thanks to the guys up at aspenweather.net for that info. And of course, we do have additional snow coming to a lot of these resorts. And I have no question that places like Mount Baker will reach 600. Alta will reach 500. Jackson Hole will reach 500. The pattern just, once we get into that first week of April, I think we're really going to add a lot to some of these resorts across the West. Looking at the snowpack in Colorado, it's really a divider between the I-70 corridor is really the key divider. If you're at I-70 and north, you're doing great. You're at, 90 to 100% of normal snowpack, snow water equivalent. If you're south of I-70 through the San Juans, the Sangre de Cristos, the Arkansas River Basin, you're not doing well. You're in the 70 percentile, so you're running way below where you should be. This is very characteristic and pretty normal for a La Nina type of winter, where it tends to favor a lot of the central to northern mountains of Colorado. Statewide, the average is 93% of normal. Okay, let me just go into the forecast aspect of this. Drill down to Alta, Utah, effective about 9,000 feet on this forecast. 25th, it is dry. 26 is dry. 27 is dry. Now, on the 28th, you don't see it, but you notice the humidity starts to go sky high, temperature starts to drop, and the winds start to gust. Snow will come in on the 28th and the 29th, and it does look like it could be heavy. Prior to that, high temps today in the low 40s, almost 50 degrees on Wednesday, 42 on Thursday, and then it turns colder after that. So there is snow coming, but we're just going to have to wait on it. All right, let's talk about the jet stream forecast. We'll start this out today. Notice the big arcing to the north of the jet. That's the big ridge of high pressure. Once we move into Wednesday, still there, but here comes the next storm system. You can see the dip in the jet. These are winds up at about 30,000 feet. So the next storm is starting to affect a lot of the Pacific Northwest, and it is a big storm system. It moves in. That will probably drop the air temps. A lot of the freezing levels will then come back down to lower elevations because we're bringing in some colder air with this big storm. You can see it, the dip in the jet moving in. So it erases the high pressure ridge. It's gone. That's Friday. And then that moves through a lot of the interior. On Saturday, the storm, you can see the dip in the jet moving through a lot of the interior Rockies, Nevada, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and slides right through Colorado. And it might actually spin up into a storm system across the eastern plains of Colorado. I'll show you what that could look like on the accumulation here in a second. And that's not going to be it. Once we go into Monday, look at the jet orientation coming off the Pacific. You've got basically a west to east flow. It's picking up moisture off the Pacific and moving it towards the coast. And here comes a bigger storm system. That's on Wednesday. So again, we're looking down the road. Once we get into that first week of April, things could be much more active across the West. Here's forecast accumulation over time. So on this map, your light blues are under 3 inches, your greens are 3 to 6, yellows 6 plus, reds 10 plus. We'll start it early today on Tuesday, March 25th. Let's move ahead. Big ridge across the west, nothing happening. All right, midday Wednesday. Here's midday Thursday. Everything's up into BC. And then we start to see a little bit of snow move into the west. This is that storm system coming in. This is early Friday, March 28th. Snow in northern Cal, Oregon, the Pacific Northwest, moving into the Tetons. Storm system makes its move. This is early Saturday, March 29th. Here it comes through Utah, Wyoming, and into Colorado. So there's early on Sunday, March 30th. The low spins up in eastern Colorado, and it starts to distribute and lay down some pretty heavy snow here across a lot of the state. And we'll probably see some snow across Denver and the Front Range. This is indicating the possibility of that is certainly over the eastern plains and quite a bit up in the mountains, especially right on top of the Continental Divide up into the northern mountains. And then it moves out into the plains. All right, here's early Monday, March 31st, another little storm system sliding through the Rockies, and then everything kind of shifts up into the Pacific Northwest. There's midday on April 1st. Then the storms, it's kind of sitting in the same spot. That is midday, April 3rd, affecting Idaho There's April 3rd right there. So we'll end right here, but this is early on April 3rd. Snow through the Tetons, Idaho, Montana, and the Pacific Northwest. Really waiting to see if this pattern is going to move to the south, if the jet will sink to the south and bring some of that precip into California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado. Okay, here is my forecast. All of today through 3:31. Keep in mind the snow that you see in the Wasatch comes very late in the period, and it doesn't all happen at one time. Anywhere from 10 to 18 inches. Up in the Tetons, about 8 to 10. Through a lot of Montana, 5 to 10 inches of accumulation. Again, very high freezing levels. That's the case through Idaho as well, 10 to 12 through Brundage and Schweitzer. Looking at probably 8 to 15 through interior BC, but again, you're going to have to be extremely high up to get that. Pacific Northwest, 1 to 2 feet. And then in California, most of the accumulation through 331 is Tahoe North. In Colorado, the biggest numbers are in the central to northern mountains, anywhere from potentially 4 to 10 inches of accumulation, less as you go south. And a lot of that accumulation happens with that Sunday storm system that spins up over the eastern plains. So we'll keep an eye on that. Up in the northeast, looking at anywhere from potentially 5 to maybe 10 inches of accumulation, upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And keep in mind, let me take you back into the timeline. Most of that's going to happen 329, 330, and 331, but it's probably going to mix with rain at the lower elevations. All right, let's end on the big western map here. And again, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's pretty late in the period into the first week of April. But still some decent snows if you're willing to go pretty high up into a lot of these mountain ranges with these warm temps. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in here. Always appreciate it. Take care and have a great day.